My childhood was a great childhood. I was born in Oakland, California, and when I was 2, we moved to Denver, Colorado, and lived there until I was 14. I consider myself a bit of a Chicano activist when I was growing up in Colorado, because my dad spent a lot of time with the Latino community. He helped migrant farm workers up in Wattenberg, which they call Wate, and so he gave health care to them and helped them out. So I really identified with my Mexican heritage. What I learned from our connection with the Wate community and the migrant farm workers was this notion that I had privilege, that they were underdogs, that they were living on, very little money and very low means, and the love and the energy that I would feel every time I was there, the welcoming that they would give to us was kind of, looking back on it, pretty extraordinary. But it made me realize that I had a lot. My dad would always call us, he said, well, we've made it to the middle class. That's what we do. We made it, because he was very, very poor. He was extremely poor when growing up. My grandpa and my great-grandfather and grandmother, so Lucy and Henry Quintana, who I believe emigrated from Mexico. At least that's what my dad told me, and we just don't know the real details of it, but they were really first generation coming here, and they lived in a very, very tiny place in the slums of Denver. My dad's mom, a little bit better. She was a maid at a hotel her whole life, so she had a little bit more, and he was poor his whole life. So then when we lived in this, as I said, lower middle class home, we felt like we'd made it. We were rich. So then it was brought home when we would go visit the migrant farm workers. We had a lot compared to them. But look at how happy they are to see us and how welcoming they are. So that had a pretty big effect on me, and I think probably had an effect on my willingness to help others and my willingness to basically treat every human being with dignity. Growing up, I blended between the Caucasian and Latino community pretty easily. I don't think I thought about it back then as being unusual. Probably the first experience I had was at one of our reunions at my grandma's house, and there were some white boys across the street, and they were yelling taunts at all of us. My brother walked over there, and my dad ran over there, grabbed him, pulled him back, read him the riot act, and said, "You have no idea what you're getting into. You're getting into a situation where you're going to get yourself killed. You got to understand the consequences of this." That was the first time I realized, okay, there's something to this being Mexican. And it was my first real view of how racism and bigotry and prejudice can turn into divisiveness and violence. Then as I got older and started going into college and getting jobs, I started to kind of push that to the side a bit. And some of that came from my dad. He really accomplished many of his dreams, but he also faced a lot of bias throughout that entire process. And I can remember very distinctly when I applied for jobs and applied for college, on the application it talks about race and ethnicity. So, Black, Hispanic, Caucasian. Dad, what do I put? And he said, you put Caucasian. I said, first of all, you're half Caucasian, so you put Caucasian, because you're not going to get as good a job if you say you're Hispanic. So I did it. I felt a little twinge of, it didn't feel so good. But I took his advice because and looking back, I don't know he did that because he loved me, he wanted the best for me, but he basically laid it out for me that, look, this is life. And unfortunately, there's going to be bias and prejudice, and they're going to be prejudiced against you if they think you're Mexican. And then I look back on that and realized that my name's Pritchard. So I don't have a Hispanic name. I kept trying to say, what kind of name is this? It's an English name. And so I had the privilege of being viewed as Caucasian because of my name. All of these experiences have led to my current capacity of really focusing on trying to be useful and being a force for good in the world. And using the privilege of being at a fantastic company, in my view the best company in the world, Procter & Gamble, and using that and the position that I'm in, which is the Chief Brand Officer, to be able to use our voice in advertising as a force for good. And look back on all of these incidents. The most profound was literally a few years ago when I was at a Hispanic leadership network and showing a range of work and talking about what we're doing in marketing. And one of the things that we're doing in marketing is using our voice in advertising to shine a light on bias and to take stands on certain things. And I showed a campaign called Labels. It was from Tide, and it was about Hispanic labels that Hispanic people are given. And literally, when I showed that, it really moved me. But I didn't tell everybody I was Mexican at the time. And I thought about that. I said, why have I not done that? Then that's when I started really thinking through all of these experiences. The fact that I was so active, and then when I started suppressing my Hispanic heritage when I got into college, and really started suppressing it when I got into work, because I was just fearful of labels, and I was trying to make a good living and trying to advance, and I really had fear that if I exposed that I was half Mexican, that I would be viewed and judged in a negative way. And then I realized as I'm now in this position where I'm using advertising to first accurately portray people, because that's important, because advertising embeds memories into people's heads. And those memories of the images and portrayals they see of people form bias. And so if we're not accurate, if we stereotype or objectify or diminish, then we're creating bias. So I realized, okay, I'm doing that for gender, I'm doing that for women, I'm doing that for black people, and because we had done some work on the talk. So I got to really take a look at this for the Latino community. And it was shortly after that I gave a talk at AdColor, and I talked about all these moments of truth that had led to this point, one of which was this realization that I'm half Mexican and I've been suppressing my heritage for more than 30 years because of fear. And it was time to come out. And so I proudly and publicly shared my Mexican heritage in a very emotional speech. That I look back on, and because it was very emotional, because I realized I was now being quite cathartic in front of 1,000 people, but I went for it. And then I did it internally as well. And then that really has set me free, because now I can talk about privilege. I can talk about being half Caucasian, half Chicano. I can talk about what I've learned around bias. I can see it more clearly. I can now double down on making sure that we do everything in our power to, at minimum, accurately portray people in everything we do, and then periodically take a stand. And because that's what's needed. Advertising is one of the greatest forces in the world. It touches people every day. If our images and portrayals are not accurate, then we're not doing the right thing. So we have a responsibility to do the right thing.